Hello and welcome to Third Eye Thinkers. I am your host, Michelle Welch.
Hi, I'm your host, Megan Benanti. Thanks for joining us today.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm really good. And you?
I'm really doing well today. I'm kind of surprised. It's kind of interesting because I thought there's a lot going on with opening the new store and all that. And I tell you, we've been having a big struggle with, I told you about it yesterday, with getting our electricity on because we have a lot of people pointing fingers saying, the city saying that it's the fault of the electricity and the electricity saying it's the fault of the city. And, I'm like, I don't care about fault. I just want some power.
Yeah, no, it feels like there's been a little bit of like tornadoes recently, I kind of think, because there's all this energy that's like swirling around. And I feel like there's a lot of action happening, which is, I remember back in August, we were really waiting for that energy.
Yes.
So it's here.
Yeah.
But it's hard to manage it,
It's exciting, but it's a whirlwind for sure. So I'm excited about our guest today, our producer of our show.
Hello.
Hi, and I'm going to let Megan introduce you, Matt, but we're excited to thank you. This was short notice, and we sure appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm always here, so I'm always ready.
Okay.
Well, we were really excited to have Matt Stoker join us today. And granted, he's always with us on the show, but he had a really eventful weekend and got to go do some documentary work. And so we wanted to have Matt come on board today. And just so you can know a little about him, Matt started doing recordings when he was like 4 years old and was totally into the sound of the voice. And so he like grew up listening to radio shows from the 30s and 40s. And that just continued into college. And then his life here at RNC and as a producer where he's been developing. And he spent like 11 years in the commercial radio industry, and now he's producing here full time. And he does a show to a podcast as well called OK Talk. And he's been here for 3 years. So, and he's also interested in anything that has to do with anything weird. And so we got really lucky to have Matt as our producer because
no wonder
we fall into the weird category.
It falls together now.
Things work out.
Yeah.
Yes.
So today, Matt got to do a documentary on Bigfoot over the weekend. And so we sent him off last week with an energy bracelet to help him balance it out. And all kinds of questions. Like we talked about everything. We even did a reading for him before he left that was related to this weekend coming up. So we get to find out about some of the results of that with him. All right. So, Matt, you're up. Dive in.
So I guess I'll start from, where this seed generated, which was on our show, OK Talk. We had been introduced to a couple that lived at a house in western Washington State, so west of Seattle, out on what's called the Olympic Peninsula, which is sort of a very wooded area. Not a whole lot of big towns over there. And they had been seeing, or they had seen and they had heard a number of of things that frightened them or confused them or they were interested in that had to deal with Sasquatch activity. And we'd interviewed them a number of times on the show. And we started kicking around the idea of, well, we want to expand what the show is about, and we're thinking about getting into some more documentary work. And why not make our first trip out to meet these people? I'd never met them in person. My co-host had been out there once or twice, and this story just fascinated us so much we decided to go out and see what it was all about.
That's awesome.
Well, what fascinated you the most before you went?
Well, it was one of those cases where I was the more and more I talked to people about the Bigfoot phenomenon, I started realizing there's a lot more out there than the couple of videos that you've seen or some footprints. There's a lot of things that just don't make sense in the sense of we were hearing audio of stuff that sounded like, honestly, it just sounded like apes. It sounded like gorillas. It sounded like there were things happening out there, such as little bits and pieces of not trash, but just little tiles or little toys that would be left left behind in certain areas and things that were taken. So stuff that was out of the ordinary for an area that mostly has bear and bobcat and mountain lion and deer running around. Not a whole lot of things that would do that sort of thing. So that story interested me so much, and also in the fact that the place was just it was remote. It was almost in a little bit of a bubble on its own in the middle of. I'm telling you, I don't know if either of you have been to the Northwest, but I've never seen a forest thicker than what it's like out there. I mean, and I grew up in the country, and when I think of forest, I think of briars and things like that. This was just, I mean, it was so green and moss everywhere and ferns. It was prehistoric almost.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, their story interested us. We had that connection, and we thought, let's try to go up there. So we flew up on Friday morning and went directly to the house. And I think immediately it started. I told you before I left that the place had a weird feeling about it.
Right.
And I think immediately we started sensing that. One, I was hearing things. I was hearing things in the woods. I heard howling in the woods that was bizarre. But there was also just sort of a tenseness in the air, I think, amongst people who were friends, who were all there to have a good time, but and to do work, but also just to enjoy each other's company. And there was a certain heaviness amongst everyone when we were there. That it's one of the reasons why I'm thankful for the bracelet that you gave me, because I felt like I was able to kind of keep a level head when other things around me were kind of spinning out of control at times.
Interesting. And what you said you heard howling?
Yeah.
Like it was not like wolves, like the kind of howling you would have anticipated, or
no, it was not. In fact, it was very similar to stuff that we had heard recorded there in the past. So it was kind of this weird sing-songy type howl that went up and down, and there were dogs all over the place. But you heard dogs, and I know what a dog sounds like, and this was different. This was a different howling, and there were nights where we would go out in it got so dark out there. We would just walk down this dirt road that led down the ridge. And you'd hear stuff walking alongside of you in the woods or up along the ridge line, and which very easily could have been a bear or a mountain lion, which is also terrifying. And I wanted to get out of there as quickly as possible.
Just a bear or a mountain lion.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was like, the look on my face, I was like, oh, like.
But it was a great trip. But I'm not lying when I say I kind of had that bracelet that you let me borrow, and I used it almost like a worry stone, where whenever I felt like, okay, people are getting upset, people are getting tense, there are short fuses here, I'm just gonna hang back. I'm gonna run my finger along these, and I'm gonna try to recenter myself and just be the voice of calmness in this kind of storm.
That's a great way to use the bracelets. That's actually, where malas, there's 108 bead malas. I don't happen to be wearing one today, but the necklaces, you can use those for mantras. And so people use those to calm down and to meditate with. And that's actually where rosary beads came from. They originated from malas. So now we do that on our bracelets. And so at Soultopia, we make the bracelets, and they have the crystals in them. And then, so that was just an intuitive thing you did.
Right.
Yeah,
right. It was something, I thought, okay, this is what this is for. So I'm going to, I don't know, try to use it in that way.
So was it mainly I'm curious about, was it the whole area, or was it where you were staying, or could you feel the house or place that you were staying in, or could you feel a difference in the energy between like outside and inside?
For me, it was as we got closer and closer to the area. Now, there's a lot of folklore attached to that area. I won't go into all of it, but going way back to the native tribes that lived there is folklore attached to it, and things that they talk about, tricksters in the woods and stuff like that. A lot of the same phenomenon actually that they talked about was stuff that we were hearing, and also just sort of this negativity. It was a big part. So yeah, I think it was, there's so much wilderness out there, and the farther and farther away I got from, I think Tacoma was the biggest city, the closest big city that we passed through. The farther and farther away I got from that, it started to feel like, okay, this is real. I'm into it. You weren't really isolated. You were 20 minutes away from a town, but it still felt like once you went up this dirt road, I'll have to show you some pictures later. You entered the forest and you were cut off from the rest of the world almost.
Oh yeah. Well, and so I don't know anything about Sasquatch. So is it, I always sort of had this image that, it was sort of like a benign creature that left us alone and minded his own business. So, but you're saying the energy around there was like really negative?
Yeah, and I don't know that I would attribute that to whatever the creature. And people have a lot of different ideas about what it is. A lot of people say it's flesh and blood only. Some people attribute more mystical things to it. But I think there could be a lot of different things going on in that area, and that's just one of them. Or it's not at all, and you're seeing the trickster aspects of the different folklore that was around there. I think it could be a number of different things, and that's one of the things that I think, if I remember correctly, came up during the reading last week was that this project, while I wouldn't necessarily have a sighting or something that I was maybe that I was personally maybe hoping for, but it would lead to other things. And when we got done shooting what we were going to shoot, we looked at it and we said, there's a bigger story here that we can tell. And so I think the finished product is actually going to be quite different than what we thought it was going to be whenever we went down there. And there's a more interesting story to tell.
That's interesting you say that, because the whole time was thinking, even before you went, I thought, it sounds to me like you're talking about something much broader than Sasquatch, that this is an area. I don't know if it's some sort of, ley line or vortex. I don't know what it is, but there's some sort of energy going on there. And it feels like when you said it's a combination, I thought that before you went, and I think you did too, Megan. It felt like, and actually I think you did, Matt, because you were talking about just the energy of the place, and that it feels, when there's energy like that, it can feel oppressive, it can feel heavy, and I believe places, buildings, forests, trees, they're all living things, so they hold the energy of whatever's gone on around them. And then there could also be things out in the woods. I believe in tricksters, I believe in elementals, I believe in fairies, and so I believe there's a big story there, and it could be things that have happened there in the past, and they retain that residual energy.
Well, and I'm picking up on it being, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Just being very protective energy, protective of the woods, and that this is a sacred space and it's meant to be honored and maybe not meant to be built on, which might be part of the issue with the house, is that it's kind of not supposed to be there.
Right.
So
part of our research actually led us to why places are named certain things. And so you'll see names pop up on the map, such as, the Devil's Bend or Devil's Lake or things like that. This place has been colloquially termed Devil's Creek. And to us, it may sound like just a name, but when we were researching the history of places like that, you realize that they were given that name because someone who lived in the area, whether it be a native peoples or whether it be first settlers, thought that place, there's something weird about that place.
Right.
And you'll see it pop up in more innocuous ways, like Fae, the word for fairy,
Fairies.
or the root word pops up in a lot of names, Lafayette, cities like that, where that's the root word, is because that was tied to fairies. So
Exactly.
Fayetteville, cities like that, like it'll pop up. So that etymology of places and names, I think, ties into this idea of, there are just certain places that have an energy about them that can be either positive or negative, but there's a reason they got named that way.
Oh my God, that's so cool. I had no idea about the word Fae being in Fayetteville and Lafayette.
It's so interesting.
Yeah. Super cool.
And because, in just talking about the Fae, and not to try to get off totally on that subject, but elementals, we in America, we don't believe in these things as much as other countries really do believe in it. I mean, I've talked before about the runway in, I believe it was Ireland, I can't remember, that no construction worker would take the job because they were going to have to tear down right where the runway was going to go. They were going to have to tear down, and I believe it was a hawthorn tree or bush that is associated with fairies. And so basically they had to reroute the whole runway. So a lot of times it's literally no one would do it.
Right.
And so I think maybe settlers and other people would take things more seriously depending on, and we've evolved from that to where we just don't necessarily, or at least some people don't believe in any of it. But think about all the things, and I love what you said about protecting the environment. When I made these, I have Sasquatch bracelets. They're called Soul Sasquatch that we made at Soultopia. And when I have one for you, Matt, and I'm going to give one to you, Megan.
They're really
too.
awesome.
And when we made these, we really thought about the fact of them. We don't know what Bigfoot's about, okay? But I channeled, and it's interesting what you said, and Megan, you too, because I channeled Earth Healer, Environmental Steward, Tune into Nature, and aid with the healing of Mother Earth. And it's interesting that you said that it's a protective mechanism. It may feel menacing to us, but they're just protecting their territory. And the trees, too, are protecting their territory.
Yeah. I mean, to me, everything is alive and has its own energy, even if it's a rock on the ground, because, of course, we all know rocks are crystals.
No,
or similar. I mean, some
they have energy. They
all have energy. So.
Right. So about the people and the moods and the tensions, how did y'all handle that?
I think it sort of ebbed and flowed. I won't say that everyone left on happy terms. Yep. But I do, and like I said, for myself personally, I tried my best to be sort of okay, let's talk about stuff. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's, try to stay calm, try to rise above it. I think that's in my nature anyway, but it definitely, I focused on that aspect and focused on what we were there for. I'll tell you why I asked the question. I really asked it because I think it's very important for you guys going forward, if you don't mind, or for anyone that's in a situation where they find, you're aware. You become aware that this is a place that's making us tense. And so then you become mindful of your energy. Right. And if each person can take responsible for their own energy and be mindful of that and know and acknowledge, even if they don't believe in it, you can just say, okay, there's something here or we wouldn't be here. And let's just be mindful of it. So I think that's the next step. I think that intentionality, I think was, I thought about that the whole trip up. I'm like, I'm ready. I was primed for something, for it to be weird, but also people had spoken that way about it. So I went into the situation thinking, okay, people could be upset with each other. People could have short fuses. There could be tension. So knowing that going in, I was thinking I'm going to focus on that, and I'm going to focus on trying to see where that's happening.
Right.
And I think honestly, I think a lot of people could probably take that into their daily lives a lot more often, whether it be your home or your work. If you have these feelings, better to go in ready rather than react. And which is what I tried never to do, was just react and try to think and keep a cool head.
Be rational.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, what was it like if you took one thing away from this weekend? Because I feel like anytime we travel, we evolve as a person. And this was, a particularly significant trip, in this regard with your personal growth and what you were filming and that kind of thing. So what do you feel like was the one area that you really evolved in?
I think the peace brokering aspect, I think, is something that I really get to stretch my muscles on a lot. I think I learned that, I better learned that to accept that the reason you go to do something is not necessarily what you're going to get out of it. So I think a lot of times in my life I had been stuck on, I'm going to do this thing. I want this specific outcome. So I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to be dogmatic about that.
Yeah.
But for me, it became more about, well, maybe we didn't get exactly what we were looking for, but we got something else which can be just as good, if not better, and to be happy about that. And also just from a more, I don't know, a not quite as deep standpoint, I loved the area. I had never been to. I'd never been to Seattle. I'd never been to that part of the country before, and we got to spend a night. Our last night was in Seattle, and so I got to go visit the market, and I got to go, visit some places, stay in a real cool old hotel, and just that part of the country I'd love to go back. I love it there, and it was one of the few places where I thought I could see myself, if I didn't live in North Texas, which I have for most of my life, I could see myself living out here because it was just so. The parts of it that were nice were so serene and right up my alley, so to speak.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love how you talked about not what I call that when you go into something and you're open to what it will bring you. I call that not being attached to the outcome.
Yeah.
So I tell people that almost every day. If you can just let go of being attached to the outcome and do everything that of course be planned. Don't be just like, whatever, but just let the outcome come as it will, which is what it sounds like that you did and your group hopefully will do. Then it's going to evolve into, I think, something much larger, because you had said it was going to be mostly about documentation.
Yes.
Right. Of Bigfoot. Do you think that's going to change? The scope is changing now.
I think so. I think so. Cause I think it's going to be more about, the area more than it is going to be, the legends of the area more than it's going to be about this one single story, which has its own merit, and I think hopefully can be included in a way.
Right.
But a lot of the stuff that we ended up talking about when we were just sort of sitting around, we didn't have a campfire, but the figurative campfire, we talked a lot about just the history of the area and folklore, and that's what really started getting our creative juices flowing. So I think we got a lot of good stuff out there, but we'll probably have to go back and do some more work, I imagine.
Well, I think that's awesome. Matt, thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Absolutely.
Thank you, Matt.
So we picked out crystals and plants that related to you and Sasquatch today.
Okay.
So
Sure
you want to go ahead?
Sure, I will start. So I started with bronzite, which is one of the stones that is in our Sasquatch bracelet. And our bracelet, the reason we have these bracelets is we have totem bracelets. And the Sasquatch kind of fell in the totem area, or the area of, what the Sasquatch can do for you, what those energies can do for you if you wear it, and if you connect with, like I've said before, like with wolf energy or whatever that is. So we made this bracelet, and it's interesting because it has jade on it from last week that we talked about on the podcast. I believe I talked about jade.
Yes.
But bronzite is really beautiful. It is brown, and it has a bit of a schiller effect, a shiny effect to it. It's one of the stones that when I found it, and when I first discovered bronzite, I was like, why doesn't everybody talk about bronzite? Because it's so beautiful. And I added in, and we don't have a picture of this, but another one called, you can say aragonite or aragonite, however you want to pronounce that. They come in different colors. They have like a Tiffany blue, but this one's the brown. And I brought it also because the properties are very much the same.
Oh, nice.
So the properties have to do with, first of all, Matt, they are protective. Both of these stones are highly protective, and not only do they repel things that are coming at us, and I always think of the black stones, plus maybe smoky quartz, but they repel what may be coming at us. It will also send it back to where it came from. Now, I'm not always real big on that because I just want to get rid of negativity and send it to the light and make it go away. Energy goes somewhere, but it will just kind of say, don't send that over here. Just go on back to where you came from. So both of these crystals will do that. And they're also known as, both of them, as stones of courtesy, which is interesting because you played the peacemaker.
Yeah.
And a stone of focused action.
Wow.
Which is, okay, so I have a plan, and I'm going to take this plan, but then if I need to go in a different direction, I did. And while you were talking, I was like, wow, there's synchronicity to what we chose today for these stones.
Yeah.
They totally fit. It helps us look at the big picture. So the big picture, and find the courage to take the next step for the necessary path for where you want to go next, and find the courage to do that. And same with aragonite or aragonite, it's Aragonite, but it reminds me of Aragon. So, and I know that's where they get the name from, but the aragonite increases the energy of your intention. So whatever your intention is, it's almost like a quartz.
It's going to magnify
it. Powers it up.
Nice.
They both bring self-confidence, and they both bring, get this, patience, because of what he was talking about, Matt was talking about. I find that very, very interesting. So both of them, bronzite and aragonite, or aragonite, however you want to say it, are great stones.
That's awesome.
Today.
Well, and I find so often people want to get the colored stones. They stay away from browns because we think, oh, it looks like a rock.
Mm-hmm.
But I use the brown stones a lot in my prayers and centering, because I just find them grounding and peaceful. Mm-hmm. But of course, I like to get my hands in the dirt.
Well, they're very much they're very much earth healers.
Yeah.
And very connected
true.
to the earth,
Mm-hmm.
and very, it's especially grounding.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't say that.
Yeah. Well, and that also makes me think of petrified wood, which of course roots you down. So.
Yeah. What'd you bring today?
Okay, so I brought in peppermint, and I was kind of excited to use it because when we talked about catmint, I got to look a little bit on peppermint. But I chose peppermint because it smells so fresh, and of course that's something we use as a flavoring for so many things. And Michelle's big stink about Bigfoot was he's stinky. She's like, he's going to be out there, and he's never going to shower, and he's going to smell really bad. And so I was like, okay, well, let's freshen him up. We'll get some peppermint.
I love it.
And so that's how I translated that in. Peppermint's kind of cool. You can see that it has kind of a square stem, and the leaves are always directly opposite each other, and then that alternates like in fours. It kind of when it goes up the stem, which is kind of cool. So it's really an organized looking plant. And I like to use peppermint in floral arrangements because it adds smell and it holds. Like it stays pretty well. Some plants get really flaccid as soon as you cut them, but it goes great with your roses and that kind of thing. For medicinal properties, though, it's really kind of cool. It's got like 26 phytochemicals and 15 nutrients, including like calcium, iron, magnesium, several of your B vitamins, and vitamin E. And I eat a lot of peppermint, and so I don't know, maybe that's why everybody always compliments me on my skin.
You do have beautiful, yeah.
I have decent skin. My sister does too, but so part of it's genetics. But I do eat a lot of peppermint and a lot of like fresh herbs and stuff in my meals and on my salads. So, one of the things though, it increases your stomach acidity, and so we think of peppermints like after a meal. Well, acidity in your stomach helps with digestion. Now, if you've had a lot of coffee, you might not want to add peppermint because you're going to be increasing that acidity. But it's good for digestion, colic, diarrhea, IBS, nausea, poor appetite, any kind of spasms, and also heart trouble and headaches. And
I've used it for headaches. It works. Yeah.
And in the magical properties, it does, it says, putting it on the head and that kind of thing. It can interfere with your iron absorption, and for some reason, it didn't say why, but it's not good for nursing moms, so that's something to be aware of if you're getting nursing moms. If you're drinking iced tea, maybe not put peppermint in it. And then what else did I see? Oh, so from a magical standpoint, it's going to increase the vibration of an area. So again, like putting it out on the table, with an arrangement, it also brings in pure energy if you want to put it on an altar. So it's going to help to not so much keep negative energies away. It's just going to invite in fresh, positive energies. So, in general, we always associate it with toothpaste and body washes and all things that are clean and sparkly. So it's an all-around super happy, positive plant to me.
Yes, it is.
One thing interesting that I was introduced to this weekend was peppermint oil, which I had never used, but someone who had traveled, I was having sinus problems, and someone who traveled with me was like, hey, I've got a little roller of peppermint oil. Why don't you try that? And I just put a little on the wrist or behind the ear, and it helped clear my sinuses. So it's actually kind of interesting that you picked that this week, because that was the first time I'd ever tried that.
That is awesome. Yeah, it does say it's also good for like colic, so which of course would be breathing related. So,
and one thing I didn't. This is a little bit going backwards, but on the crystals, the thing I didn't mention is they're great for chronic fatigue. Those two are great for chronic fatigue syndrome, or any one of those that would fall under when they don't really know how to diagnose some of that fatigue that you have. So, and peppermint is revitalizing too.
Right, and I was going to say that's perfect with peppermint because it is generally energizing. Although I did read that if you put it under your pillow, it can help with sleep. So, in a restful state, I
combine that with lavender, maybe, right?
Yeah, that would be nice together. Oh, definitely, the smells would be wonderful together. So, do you want to look at a reading real quick?
If we have time.
I think we've got a little time.
Okay, let's do this.
Real quick, he said.
All right, I'm going to pull out a couple charms. You can hear the jingling, everybody. All right, we have a cornucopia and we have a unicorn. So, you can either, if you're new to listening, you want to pick either the cornucopia or the unicorn charm, and the reading that applies will apply to you. Okay, and I'm just gonna shuffle these real quick, Michelle, and then I'm gonna let you start on the reading here. For the cornucopia, we have Queen of Cups, and we have the Knight of Wands.
Okay, so I'll go ahead and start on that one. If you picked the cornucopia, the horn of plenty, I think it's known as sometimes. It's interesting with the holidays coming up and the harvest and everything going on right now that this one was pulled. I think that this one, to me, if you pulled this one, what I'm getting is that there is coming a time for you to reconnect with some members of your family. And going into these holidays, I think that's going, and I feel like we're starting the holidays in about a week or two. I mean, they're already taking down Halloween and decorating for Christmas, Yeah, some places I'm like, wait, what? I'm way behind. So it's really, for a lot of people, I feel like really try to be more gentle going towards yourself and to others going into this holiday season. Don't rush in too impulsively to things. Don't go charging into situations. Go in, again, like we were talking about earlier, with that mindful energy. Mind your own energy, and then that will help raise the vibration of everybody else around you. Instead of being so concerned about worrying about how they're behaving, mind your own energy during these holidays. That's what I'm getting.
Well, I gasped because I was like, oh my gosh, that's totally what I got, is that this is about family and the coming together, over the next couple months. It's not just a specific holiday. It's not just Thanksgiving, not just Halloween, not just Christmas, but it's unifying and the connection between families needing each other. And the young and the old, those generations. And so even if you've lost someone and there's a focus on that and missing them as you go into these holidays, don't be afraid to reach out to them, to pray, to connect however you connect. To me, there's a lot of fulfillment in this, and taking the time to enjoy that and the emotional connections and feeling really rewarded with that.
And I will add, I agree with that. And just to say, our guest next week is Dakota Lawrence, and he is coming into Soultopia, and he does mediumship. He's done it since he was 15 years old, and he'll have a class. And when you spoke about connecting, you can pray, you can talk, just go out in nature and connect with your loved ones that have transitioned. But another way might be to come to see one of us, or to come to that event or listen to our show next week.
Yeah, and Dakota's great. I've gone to him over at Soultopia in a group environment, and it was really cool. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So for card reading number 2, quickly.
Well, we've got the unicorn here, and actually, as I'm looking at it, unicorn is missing one leg, so we have a 3 out of 4 leg unicorn, and and I don't know how to tie that in.
I don't know.
Maybe we're a little off balance. No. To me, this is it might feel like for you this week that things aren't quite starting out the way you wanted them to, but don't give up hope yet, because there's a lot emotionally that's going to develop and grow in this. And I do feel like for you, the changing weather is going to have an impact on how you're feeling about your life. So don't get hung up on the small things not working out right now. Really pay attention to that bigger picture that's coming forward, and don't be afraid to really be authentic about how you feel about the situation and what's coming up. Speak your truth. That's going to help you right now.
I'm just going to add that you don't have to be the center of attention, whoever drew this one. And I drew two. So you don't always have to be I always pick two. So if you really don't, for some reason that is just flying off the table here at me, is you may feel like, oh, people aren't loving me or paying attention to me. They are. It's just that they're busy with their things right now. So you don't really have to command that attention. Like Megan said, just step into your authenticity, and then that will come to you.
Yeah. And that might be part of the reason we're looking at a slightly broken unicorn.
That's what came to me.
Yeah. So, all right, cool.
Thank you again, Matt, for joining us.
Yes, it was such a pleasure.
That was awesome.
Yeah, no, we're really glad to have you, and we hope you guys enjoyed the show today. If you did, please feel free to write us a review. We'd be happy to hear from you, and also subscribe to us on both YouTube and on Facebook. Thanks so much, and keep third eye thinking.